Hi there. Today I'm here with Confidence Okogena. Confidence is a developer advocate over at Cloudflare and based in Manchester.
Birmingham, very close.
Birmingham. Oh, sorry,
Very
I got
close.
that wrong. Yeah, your LinkedIn says London, by the way.
So the thing is, people don't know that Birmingham is actually such a large city. I think it's because Manchester seems to be more popular. The football club, the
Yeah,
Manchester
it's
FC Football
yeah,
Club,
and I think
and Man
like
City and the
for
other ones.
someone outside the UK, London steals the show anyway.
Okay, so of course, London is like number one. Then the second largest city in the UK, and this is a fact, is Birmingham. So I'm in Birmingham.
Okay, actually, that's not what we want to talk about because, as I said, you're developer advocate at Cloudflare, and we are going to talk about the developer platform. Because, like, I guess most people still think of Cloudflare as a CDN provider, but that has changed a lot. And I'm very, very excited to learn what actually has changed. So maybe you can give us an introduction into like what the dev platform actually is and what you can build on it on a grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So what you talked about is true, because even for myself and for many people I have talked to, like random developers who know about Cloudflare, they still think of Cloudflare as a cybersecurity slash CDN company. And they're not wrong, because Cloudflare actually started that way, like way back in the day. So if you need, like if you're a small business or an enterprise company and you need like a security firewall, for your network, instead of like buying those network appliances, you can actually just use Cloudflare, and it's so easy to manage because it's all in the cloud, very convenient, very cheap, very secure, and that's how Cloudflare like blew up and became popular providing such services. Then a little bit later, we started providing content delivery. Like you have some assets you need to deliver really fast. We can cache that for you and deliver it to wherever that traffic needs to go to. So maybe like images for your website or media content, other media content for your website. People used Cloudflare for that. But that has changed. So that's where your question is coming from, because people still think of Cloudflare as doing that business, but we do a whole lot more than that. And we've been, in the last 10 years, so the Workers platform, which is a serverless compute platform, launched around 2014, 2015. And since then, we, in addition to providing the security services we are known for, and CDN and DDoS protection, all of that stuff, we now have products or tools for developers to actually build and deploy applications on top of Cloudflare infrastructure. Because while trying to do the whole CDN security bit, we ended up deploying servers in over 330 cities in the world. And we built massive infrastructure around that. So we thought, oh, why not just let people write code on the network, on the edge? And that's how the idea took off. And since then, it's been awesome. Like we've seen lots of interesting things built on the Cloudflare network running on the edge.
So you can basically build complete applications on top of the Workers platform, right?
Yeah, front-end applications, back-end applications, microservices, full stack apps, AI apps, because that's what everyone's into these days, agents, storage services like your S3 databases. So you name it, the complete stack from top to bottom, you can actually run that on Cloudflare now.
Okay, but like still when people think of building stuff on the cloud or on a serverless platform, I think most people still think of the big three, like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and maybe Oracle or something. I don't know. So what does it make different from Cloudflare Workers platform?
So I think Cloudflare is completely, it's a completely different platform than the big three you mentioned, because we are actually operating a completely different architecture. So take, for instance, if you have an application you want to get deployed on a traditional cloud platform, how do you go about doing that today? So traditional cloud platforms will provide you a container that is always running, or maybe a container that sleeps after a while. And then you write your application, you package it inside of a Docker file, and you deploy it to those platforms. And for the most part, that works. But there are several issues with that. So if you have users in one location that is really close to your server, that's probably fine. Like, that's an easy way to get started, because you know exactly where your users are, and you can deploy your container close to that user, and then that's good. But if you're actually building a service that scales across the globe, then you start to see where that model breaks, because while that container or that server that is running close to a particular region will be like really fine for servicing users around that region, people on the other end of the world would have issues while trying to access it because of the network latency and other issues that come around when you don't have a distributed architecture. So that's what makes Cloudflare different, and that's where workers shine, because it's a completely different architecture. And the idea is, instead of having your application live inside of one container in one particular region, your application lives in every server, in every location. Cloudflare has an infrastructure in all 330 plus cities. So what that means is that no matter where your user is, there is going to be a server close to them that is running your application already. And when a request comes in, you have like very fast responses because there's literally no latency. So that's where Cloudflare is different.
So that's basically like edge computing in region Earth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your app runs globally. And for the developer, you don't have to think about it. You just run the deploy command, and that's it. We handle all of the placing of the application and scaling for you, and spinning it up when a request comes in. So you just deploy, and that's it. You don't have to configure regions or set up complex traffic routing systems just to be able to like load balance the application. We do all of that for you, because we already have all of the experience from the networking days, right? We already built all of this infrastructure. So we are bringing it to developers so that they can leverage that knowledge and scale the applications to meet many people.
I mean, there's more services to the Workers platform than just compute. So that means that we have to take care of like the routes probably to a backend database, which is something that you should consider if you're putting code on the edge. We can talk about that later, but I want to circle back to the developer experience. And my experience with Wrangler, that's the tool that you use for deploying to Cloudflare, it's pretty close to the code. It just runs like what you know from Next.js. You have a dev server or something, and you said it. You just type Wrangler deploy, and everything is online. So to me, that's a different mental model to what you are expecting from services like AWS Lambda, for example, where you have one file for each function, basically. And here you can have your whole application packaged and just deployed. So this is a design decision from the first principle to make it more developer friendly, I guess. But what does it mean for the developer? What is the right way to build a function-based serverless application on Workers? Is it like with Hono, deploy the whole thing, or is it more like the AWS approach? One file should be one function and one route.
So I think that's also a differentiator here, because we want people to architect their app the way they think it's best to work. And we give developers that flexibility when it comes to how they want the application to be structured. And when you talk about like using frameworks, we support all of them: Astro, Next.js, Hono, even Node frameworks that traditionally did not work on Cloudflare, like Express and the other ones, because they relied on Node-specific APIs. They are now all supported on Cloudflare Workers. So build your app the way you want. Build it, in fact, like you were writing the application to run on a container. and we will run it on a serverless platform for you. Like we just handle all of the magic housekeeping that you don't need to worry about, so that you have like a really nice interface to build your app and structure it how it makes sense to you and your team, because each team has a workflow that works for them. We want the platform to be flexible and low level enough that they can customize it to meet how they prefer to write code. So yeah.
So basically, it's packaging your entire application and just zip it and send
deploy,
it via the deploy command.
Yeah. And speaking of like deployments, you can deploy with the CLI, like you said, Bas. But I think what most like developers prefer, especially when you're working on large teams and you need to do code reviews before they are merged to production, is having a system that whenever code is merged to the main branch, you trigger an automated deployment. You have a CI that builds it and deploys it. And Cloudflare Workers also supports that. You don't have to like go set up your first party CI. All you need to do is connect your repository to your Cloudflare account or to your Workers deployment. And each time there is a push to the main branch, it's redeployed. And you can also set up feature deployments, like, or preview deployments. If someone works on a feature branch and pushes it, to automatically make a preview deployment with a link that can be shared, and people can like test it, see that it's working before it gets merged to the main branch. And then the main branch is redeployed. It's built and deployed. So we support CI pipelines too. Because
so you can do that natively, like in the Cloudflare backend, but you can of course also set up your GitHub actions with the CLI and stuff like that. I want to get back to the technical details a bit. You mentioned that initially it had some issues with node compatibility. Probably they are solved now. For the most part, I guess they are. But that means that workers don't run on Node. So what is the runtime that you're using behind the scenes?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Something I had to like learn a little bit about when I like got started using Workers. So I think we're all familiar with the idea that if you're writing JavaScript, it's probably running in Node, because when you start your dev journey, you learn about HTML, you learn about CSS, then you learn about JavaScript, and the next thing is Node, because that's how you actually build backend apps in JavaScript or TypeScript. So it makes you wonder, like, how is it that you're able to build a backend service in not Node, something other than Node? Of course, there are other like runtimes like Born and Dino, but they're all just like Node, because it's built in a similar way. But the Cloudflare serverless platform is quite different. I would say it runs more on a similar architecture to what your web browser, if you use Chrome or Firefox, runs, because that also runs JavaScript. Interestingly, they have their own runtime. Chrome uses V8, and I think Firefox uses SpiderMonkey or something like that.
It's SpiderMonkey.
And the idea is that each time you open a new tab, the engine creates a fresh context to execute the JavaScript that is going to come from that website you're visiting. And that's why each tab you open is isolated. They have their own JavaScript context that's isolated. And you can have multiple tabs of the same web page opened, and it's going to create isolated context to run all of these JavaScript applications. So the same way Cloudflare Workers, it's built on a very, very similar concept, that we have the engine running, and each time an application is deployed, or each time a request comes in to run your application, we sort of spin up and isolate on the Workers runtime that creates a self-contained context for your application to run it and execute it, and then clean it up when it's done. And what that means is that when a request comes in, because it's so fast, remember when you're opening a new tab on your browser, that doesn't take seconds.
Instantly.
It loads instantly. So that means for your applications have zero code start, because unlike other serverless offerings that actually rely on containers, they have to boot up a container, for example, to be able to run your application and then shut it down. This is not containers. It's a completely different architecture that dynamically loads versions of your application or workers in isolated context and shuts them or unloads them after the request is executed. So what that means is that it's just as secure as containers, but then you don't have that code start, that's waiting for a few seconds before the application actually starts. So zero code starts, your applications are like really fast and very memory efficient.
So basically the runtime is like hot loaded, and then each time a request comes in, you get like just the execution context isolated, and that's why it's so fast.
Yes. The runtime orchestrates the whole thing. And if you're a developer who's building on Cloudflare, you probably don't know about this because we don't want you to think about it. You only think about writing your code and deploying it, and the runtime handles all of this like scaling and memory management and stuff you don't have to worry about. And then in return, because your application only runs when a request is being processed, you're only charged for the CPU runtime of your application, and then it's very cheap. In fact, most people haven't exhausted the free tier of Cloudflare because the free tier offerings are really generous, and most people end up building their apps all on the free tier. But then when you need to pay for compute, it's very, very cheap because you're only paying for the time your application was loaded in memory and executed on the CPU.
We have to circle back on this one as well, because
Okay.
that's the interesting part. I remember probably a couple of months later after the Workers platform actually started, people were like, well, there are so ridiculous limits on that. How can I build like serious applications within like 10 milliseconds of limits for runtime? But that is something that is calculated differently from what you would expect, right?
Yeah, it is. Because on the surface, it looks like, can you actually build serious things on this? And reality is like, yes, because the startup is really fast. The memory is managed efficiently, and then if what you're building is a web service that needs to process a request, that's a lot of time to get your request processed. But we know for certain workloads, you actually need more time. Say, for example, you're doing some computations when a request comes in and you need to return the response within the request loop. You might need more time. And so Cloudflare Workers actually supports having more CPU time if you need it. So I think if you want more details, it's in the Cloudflare developer docs on developers.cloudflare.com. And if you go to the workers page and scroll down to platform and then limits, your workers can now process requests for up to 15 minutes.
Okay, but actually, my question was about something different. It was about like not charging for the actual wall clock time, because you are not charging for waiting for I/O or something like that.
Oh,
right?
okay. I think I get your question. So yeah, if your worker needs to talk to other services like an external database or an external API, and it needs to wait for the network, and maybe that takes a while for the response to come back from the network, because your worker is actually just waiting for a network request and not doing anything on the CPU, it's practically idle. We don't charge you for that. So we get to pass those like savings to you as a developer, because the runtime has been built to be very efficient, and everyone gets to benefit from it.
Yeah, so basically that's what most applications do, right? They connect to some API, they connect to a database, they connect to whatever, send an email maybe, and this waiting time is actually not built, right?
Yes, it's not. It's not.
That's the beauty of those isolates, I guess.
Yeah. That's why it's so efficient. And people ask me, why is it that the paid plan is so cheap? This is why. This is why it's so cheap.
Okay. So there are also other services. Cloudflare has a database. They have like a file storage or for like a bucket store, similar to S3. I think it's called R2.
R2, yes.
Is there a reason why it's called R2?
I think there's a story behind it. I'm not so sure, but yeah, there's a story behind why it's called R2. But I think it's, if I remember correctly, S3, R2, letters before the S and the number before 3. So that's why it's just like a one-up of the S3 name. So I think that's the
and the database product is called D1, right?
Yeah, it's called D1.
You should really consider calling that D2 because then you can have
R2
like a
D2.
stack built on R2D2. Okay, but before we talk about those services, like I think that they are pretty self-explanatory. Everyone knows what a database does. Everyone knows what a file store does. But again, behind the scenes, they are built on something that's called durable objects. That's also something that a developer can use by themselves on the Workers platform. But it's a very complicated thing to get your mind figuring out what it actually does. At least it was for me when I first tried it. Maybe you can help us understand what durable objects are.
I think the naming could have been better because it sounds so like big and complicated, but really it's simple. So it's solving a specific problem because when you build applications, you need to be able to store state. You need a way to remember application state and use that state in maybe perhaps future requests that the application processes. You can have internal state, which is stored in the memory of the application, or you can have the state stored externally. That's where like KV comes in, KV caches comes in. So for applications built on Workers, because the Workers runtime is a serverless environment, and when the request that the application receives is processed, the application is spun down. It doesn't remember what happened in the previous request. Like if you need to, it's all cleaned up, and then when a new request comes up, it's spun up again, processes the request, and it's shut down. So if you need a way to store that state that your application needs across requests, you need a place to put this in. And that's what Durable Object is. It's a state management solution for Cloudflare Workers, such that if you have multiple requests coming into your application and you want to be able to remember this for a later time, you just build using Durable Object. A Durable Object is essentially a Cloudflare Worker that has states, that can remember states, and that state can be shared across multiple applications, and you can have multiple durable objects per application. So it's just like a really easy way for you to manage states if your application needs to. Not every application needs to have state maintained across requests.
What would be an application that would need it?
So one good example of this is when you're building real-time apps. Like
chat?
Like a real-time chat or real-time game. And the application needs to be able to remember the clients that are connected to it and where to send those messages to, what channels to send those messages to. So that's a connection state that your application typically needs to remember. And that's what durable objects are really good for, because it's state. It's able to hold and maintain that state, and you can build real-time applications and like literally everything else that needs state maintenance.
I think a chat app is a good example because it's easy to understand. So what does it mean in the end? Like I do have like one durable object for each client that connects to it and receives messages. Basically for each user, one durable object. Is that the way how it works?
Yeah. So your durable object acts as a WebSocket connection
Mm-hmm.
coordinator. And then say it's a chat app, like a web chat app, all of your clients who needs to be in the same room can
Mm-hmm.
connect to the same durable object. So let's use WhatsApp for example, and group chats in
Mm-hmm.
WhatsApp. Everyone in the group chat have to be in the same room because you need to send that message to everyone who's in that group chat. People in group chat too don't need to know about that message because that's a separate space. So you can create a durable object per group chat or per conversation because that's like logically groups the number of clients that are connected. And every client that is connected to an individual durable object, the durable object is able to remember the state and knows what active clients it has and relay the message across all of the active clients. So you
I
can
got it.
create a durable object per conversation or per
Yeah.
group chat, depending on what sort of application you build in. It's really, really good at doing stuff like that.
And how long does a durable object actually live? How long is durable?
Forever, actually.
Actually, forever?
Yeah, it lives forever. And it's interesting because it's still built on the same serverless architecture as Cloudflare Workers. When your durable object isn't running, it's actually paused and it's still able to remember state. And the WebSocket connections to it are still active. We don't drop those WebSocket connections. Rather, we hibernate them such that when a new message comes in or when a new request comes in, your durable object is going to be able to wake up as fast as a worker and respond to it while maintaining those connections and while remembering the state. So it's actually it's built in a similar way as Cloudflare Workers because it's also a
Got it.
serverless state solution.
So, and what's the pricing model for that? Do I pay per durable object, or how for storage, or how does that work?
I'm actually just going to refer you to the Cloudflare docs. So if you go to Cloudflare docs, search durable object, go to platform and limits. It builds very similarly to your Cloudflare worker. All the limits that apply to a Cloudflare worker also apply to your durable object. So you can see more information on usage because durable object has additional features to it,
Mm-hmm.
like the SQLite built-in database in durable objects. So it has a few other extra features, but it's priced similarly to your worker plan.
Okay, got it. But that if it's priced anyhow, similar to workers, I probably need to clean up durable objects because I don't want to have them forever, ever, right? I probably don't want to have access to my group chats from 10 years ago. So how does that work?
Okay, so that's interesting because you're only charged when your durable object is running.
Okay.
So even if you have a durable object that was created 10 years ago and is not running, not doing anything, you're not charged for it. And it could be there forever if you
So I
wish.
can spin up millions of durable objects, and if I don't use them
you don't
after a
pay for them.
time, I'm fine.
Yeah, you don't pay for them. You don't have to worry about cleaning them up. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So again, like it took me a while to really understand the mental model behind it, but it's actually a very cool way to build applications. And if I remember correctly, like durable objects are also like the building blocks of your other services, right? Like
Yeah.
KV, for
Maybe.
example, is
Yeah.
built upon durable objects. The database as well?
Yes. Lots of services are built on top of durable objects. Yeah.
So basically, we have now cleared up the primitives of the workers platform. You have compute with workers. You have database with R1, which could probably be named R2. You have sorry, database was D1, and
D1
R2 was the
and R2.
bucket
Yes.
storage, right? Okay. But then there is a whole new thing popping up right now, and of course, Cloudflare is also going to take care of that, and that is AI.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's a Sandboxes product, which is basically workers, right?
I would say no. It's different. So
Okay.
we launched support for containers because you can do a whole lot on Cloudflare Workers. Like you can go really, really far, but there are certain things you can't do on Cloudflare Workers. For example, if you want to build a web-based video editor that needs to run FFmpeg to do video transcoding and applying effects and all of that, it's possible to do it on Cloudflare Workers, but it's probably going to be really hard. And for use cases like that, having a container that just a serverless container that runs in the cloud that only you only build when it's running just like a worker would be really convenient. So we actually just built that and shipped it. It's running on the same like core principles as a Cloudflare worker. It's a container you deploy stuff to just like any other container, but you're only charged when it is running. You can make it run forever if you want, because that's going to depend on your workload. But you can set your container to automatically go to sleep if it's not processing any request for maybe like 10 minutes, for example. If no active request is coming up, you can tell it to go to sleep, and then we pass those cost savings onto you. So that's where Sandboxes come from. It's built on top of containers. And that's because when you're running agents, or perhaps you want to actually train an LLM, you need a secure way to be able to, a secure environment for them to run. And in some cases, they just need a full-blown Linux environment. So Sandboxes is an abstraction for you to create containers programmatically with JavaScript.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So, and what are the types of applications that are typically built with those sandboxes? Because like if I run like a coding agent, Copilot or Claude or whatever, I could probably spin up a local sandbox in Docker or something, so that it doesn't destroy my entire hard drive if I put the wrong prompt or something. But what is the application of running that in the cloud? What are people using that for?
Lots of cool use cases. So I'll mention two. First is building vibe coding platforms, like because in that context, you need an environment that you can run any programming language. Could be Python, could be JavaScript, could be Ruby, could be Rust. So you need an actual Linux environment. You need it to be isolated per user. You need to be able to execute the binaries of each language. The user might want to do something fancy, and you need a way to securely run it in an isolated context. So that's where sandboxes tend to be very useful. And we've seen lots of people build like such coding platforms on top of Cloudflare, where each user comes to the platform, creates a new project that launches a sandbox with a Linux environment where their codes can be generated, can be bundled or compiled, and also can be executed. And sometimes you might want that to be running in the background, because these platforms tend to also enable you deploy the application you have built right there to the platform itself. So you can actually have your sandbox compile that project and get it running like 24/7 if that's the kind of application you want to build. So Sandbox is a programmatic abstraction for building containers. And another cool use case, which is the second example I'm going to mention, is running agents. Last week, the Cloudbot thing like really took off, and
Exploded.
yeah, I also got on the train, and it's wonderful. Like I tried installing it, and it's really cool. The stuff it can do is really powerful. But you notice that everyone who was trying Cloudbots wanted to try it in an isolated environment. Like you don't want to do it on your work laptop, because then it has access to all of your files, all of your apps, and everything you do on that machine. It's recommended you run it on a separate or isolated machine. That's where Cloudflare Sandboxes come in. We give you that sandbox, which is a full-blown computer in the cloud, and you can do whatever you want. And we just today shared a demo showing you how to run Cloudbot, or it's now called Moltbot, on Cloudflare Workers in the cloud. So Yeah, running AI agents is a really cool use cases because it provides all of the isolation and abstraction, like that kind of clean environment you would want for an LLM, because you wouldn't want to give it access to stuff that's sensitive, and then you can let your agents run loose inside of like a clean sandbox environment.
Yeah, love it. So people don't need to buy hundreds of Mac Minis. They can just use
Yeah,
Cloudflare Sandboxes. Okay,
yeah.
but let's dig a bit into how that really works. So I set up my Claude bot. Where do I set it up? Actually, inside a container on Sandboxes, or
So we have the whole thing in a GitHub repository. The way it works is that so we have a project. You can just click on the button to deploy, and you actually don't have to worry about setting up anything. Like that's I actually really mean it. If you've installed Claudebot or Moltbot on your personal laptop, it's a lot of setup. You have to like download the CLI. You have to configure a lot of stuff. You have to configure the AI provider. You have to configure the browser so that I can search the web and do so many other things. We already have that set up inside of a sandbox script. All you need to do is just click on the button to deploy it, and that runs the CloudBot instance inside of a Cloudflare sandbox. And the things it needs to actually get stuff done is exposed to it. So we use Workers AI to route requests to the LLM it needs to talk to, and you can like choose from any of the models that Cloudflare supports on Workers AI. We actually support all of them, both paid or both closed source and open source models. Then we also provide it the context it needs to run a browser in the cloud through browser rendering API. We also provide it with R2. So R2 is like the object storage. But in this case, R2 is mounted as a persistent file system so that the context, it's really cool. The context of your agent, when it's written to disk, it's actually written to an R2 bucket, and when no request comes in and your agent needs to go to sleep or your sandbox needs to go to sleep, that's fine. But when a request comes back up, everything is booted, the R2 bucket is mounted, and it remembers where you left off. So
and it looks like a native file system.
Yes, it looks like a native file system.
And
so really, go on.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask where does my code live? Where do I get the Claudebot accessing my own code then? Is it downloaded from my GitHub repository also to R2, or how does that work?
Oh, so if you tell Cloudbot to like do stuff on your code base. Oh yeah, that also gets synced to the mounted R2 file system. So it remembers what it has worked on the last time, and if it needs to remember it for a future case, like that's to it appears just like a local file. Yeah, it's a local file to Cloudbot, and there's literally no difference. So it's running agents in Sandboxes is like a really, really cool experience. And perhaps we can leave a link to this setup, like a one-click deploy button to run Moltbot or Cloudbot, so you can go check it out on
Absolutely.
Cloudflare
We
Workers.
put that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Very cool. And just for the sake of completeness, you mentioned Cloudflare AI. And you have support for closed source models, open source models, and all that stuff. So what is Cloudflare AI? Is it a router for different LLMs, basically?
Yes.
So
it does routing to different LLM providers, but in a smart and different way, because in addition to routing your requests to other LLM providers, we offer lots of other features. One is running open source models like your DeepSeek R1, your GLM 7.5 and Minimax, and all of the really cool, massive open source library models run on Cloudflare Workers AI. For other features that I think is really cool is that you can have fallbacks. So say, for example, you are talking to like a closed source model like Opus 4.5, and maybe there's an issue that request gets dropped. You can actually set it up such that it routes to a second fallback model or a third fallback model. so that that request definitely gets processed and you get a response back to your client. Other things is that you only need to set up one API key, and then you can use like all of these various providers, including the open source models. And yeah, it's cool. It has a really nice dashboard where you can see the usage, the models that are being used, and other metrics and analytics with usage, so you can optimize your LLM usage and like actually save money.
Very cool. And I can also access them from Workers, right?
Oh yeah, you can
So
access
it's
them
not
from
only a Sandbox product, but I can also build my own stuff with that on a
yes.
Workers app.
Yes, and also if you're not using Workers, if you just need an API that can unify all of your model providers and provides like a single interface to talk to any LLM provider, and you just need an API call. Say you're not building on Workers, you're building on another platform. We also provide you with the API, and you can call it from anywhere.
Oh, that's cool. So that means I can also set up my CLI coding agent, whether that's
Yes.
open code or whatever,
Yes,
with Workers AI, right?
definitely. Yes.
That's a lot of stuff that's going on at Cloudflare. That's a lot of stuff that's going on at Cloudflare. So I'm also interested not only in the technical details, but also like what is it like working at a company at such a pace and with such a broad product portfolio that more or less came up within the last couple of years.
I'll say it's really exciting. Like, it is so exciting. There is no dull moment because there's always something new, something cool that someone, a team is working on. And we have this really awesome initiative of having demo days on a Friday where people come to present stuff they are working on. So you see lots of really, really cool demos. And some of these demos end up being products on the on Cloudflare. Cloudflare Workers itself was a demo, and that turned into a product that has become the primitive that the rest of the platform is built on. So we see it's a really interesting place to work. We are the forefront of cutting edge tech, and it's so cool to see lots of exciting things every week.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, what does your typical day look like? Is it just playing with new technology and being excited about it? What does it really look like?
To be fair, I have to also do real work. Like it's that, but I do have to do real work. But yeah, it actually involves experimenting with a lot of cool technologies. I take, for example, the conversation we're having with Cloudbot. Cloudbot is quite recent and it became popular like within the last week, but we already found a way to get it running in a serverless environment, and that's really cool. Like we get to work on really cool technologies and show people how to think about it, how to get it running in a serverless environment, and agents is also something that like Cloudbot is an agent, but just agents in general. Like you said, most of it is built on Sandbox SDK. That's also a new like sort of technology that has come up in the last couple of weeks, and we have that too. So yeah, we actually get to do a lot of cool stuff, but then also have some work to do. Like what I work on primarily is teaching people how the Cloudflare developer platform works, and that involves making tutorials. We have a very active community on YouTube and also on our documentation site, and we have lots of content on there.
So, what was your way into the company? How did you find it, or how did they find you?
That's an interesting question. It's just like when people get married and you ask them, "How did you guys meet?" So yeah, it was actually on Twitter, if I'm being honest. I saw a tweet from my previous manager, Ricky, really nice, lovely manager, one of the best ones I've had. And he was just like, "We're hiring for DevRel." And I responded to his message and I applied, and it all took off from there. So yeah, we love engaging with our developer community, because what we're building is a platform for developers. So we tend to hang out a lot where developers hang out, those spaces where developers hang out. Hacker News, Twitter. Lots of developers are hanging out on LinkedIn these days, and also we hang out on LinkedIn and all of the other places that we find the developer community.
Very cool. So, and I guess Cloudflare is actively hiring, right?
Oh yeah, we are. So please go to cloudflare.com/careers, or just check the homepage, scroll down to the bottom to see the open roles we have. We have lots of open roles on there.
So to make the previous question a little bit more interesting, what are you looking for? So if people considering applying for working at Cloudflare, what should they bring to the table, and how can they stand out in probably the massive run of applications that you get?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. And the tip I usually give out is make sure you know how the Cloudflare platform works. Like, go use it, go build something on it, and come show it to us. Because we want to see that people actually understand how the platform works, because to some extent it's different from what you may be coming from. So go use it, go build something awesome, and show it to us. Come talk to us about it.
And the good thing is it's free.
It's free. It's free. You don't even need to put in your credit card for it. It's free to get started.
Very cool. Confidence. That was so much information. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Bas, for inviting me to come talk to you.
So other than cloudflare.com/careers, if people want to follow up that conversation, what is a good way to get in contact with you? What you mentioned you're on Twitter, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I have a Twitter account. I also have a LinkedIn account, and my handle is @megaconfidence. So feel free to come say hello. I try to respond to all of my DMs. So yeah, send me a message and say hello.
Very cool. We put these links down in the show notes as well. Thank you again. That was nice.
Thanks for having me, Bas.